without further ado, if we could fill the chat with warm welcomes and shout outs as we bring Dr. Carmen Williams to the stage here. Thank you, Carmen.
All right. Thank you, Adam and Megan, for having me today. Um, Adam asked me to come and share my system-wise story with you all, and I have about 20 minutes to give you a 2.5 year overview of how we use this practice in our school system. So I will do my best, but you might have questions. So we're talking about emotions today, and we're in a field of professionals that have to have credentials to do the hard work of serving children. Our focus is always student-centered, yet we are sometimes asked to manage adult feelings, and that can be tough sometimes. And so I wanted to share this feelings wheel. And this is great when you have a toddler and you're trying to get them to name their emotions and they're crying or they're screaming or they're kicking and you're trying to get them to name, do you feel sad? And it's like, yeah, I feel sad. It's like, okay, we can deal with that. But then we have adults, and it gets a lot more complicated. And feelings have different levels. And it's not just I'm sad. It gets into maybe I'm disappointed, or maybe I feel some despair. Or maybe I'm feeling guilty or regretful or lonely. And these adult feelings become much more complicated. Um, and that's on a typical day, right? That means we're just dealing with the chaos that comes with being in a school system. But when you are so bold as to try to initiate change in your district, the feelings kind of get ramped up. They're on a whole different level. And I remember the title of the session today is Scaling Joy. When we experience change initiatives, it's not really joy that we see or feel immediately. Perhaps you've seen this quote, what people resist is not change per se, but loss, right? It's the uncertainty that comes with a change initiative and this idea that someone may lose something. They don't even know yet, but it's possible. And so you might be familiar with grief cycles and the stages of grief. And this just kind of illustrates this idea of loss and the emotions that are felt during loss. And this grief cycle is specifically on death. But if change is equal to loss, and you bring your whole self to your work and it becomes your identity, then going through a change process could feel like a death to your identity. And it's really important as leaders that we acknowledge that. We're going to talk about joy, I promise. We're going to get there. Here we are. So, hopes and dreams, what we want people to experience. As leaders, we put in our best people to research what is evidence-based out there, what's trending, what's the future of education, the future of jobs and careers for our students. And we try to get ahead of that curve as much as possible with the limited resources we have. And we're hoping that all of our colleagues and employees also are joining us in this hopefulness that this change initiative is going to bring about our desired results, right? And so as leaders, we might enter with a lot of joy and hope, but it's not often matched by the people who are actually asked to implement the work, right? So for myself, I can tell you, I get very excited about change and possibilities. And I'm not always the person who has the work of doing the legwork of implementing or walking that out. So that's tough, and we just need to acknowledge it. So I'm going to tell you my story. This is me just reading some books, but my story and my journey as a system level leader. Again, I'm an assistant superintendent in the New England area, and I serve a small district, about 5,500 students, and we are embarking some big changes using the system-wise process. So we had a year of digging into a data cycle. This is a DataWise through line. If you're not familiar with DataWise, DataWise is a framework for looking at school improvement, and it incorporates the ACE habits of mind that Adam shared earlier. And there are 8 steps in this process. So here are a few of our steps just to kind of illustrate. We took a step back before we could move forward. So in 2019, our district adopted a Portrait of a Needham graduate, and you all are probably familiar with a Portrait of a Graduate as a vision for the district. And it was wonderful. There are five competencies. It was a large group of stakeholders that came together to build that vision. But then the pandemic hit. And so this vision became a beautiful poster that hung on our walls, but it wasn't truly enacted yet. It wasn't changing the way we did business. And so we decided to do a data inquiry cycle and try to understand what is happening with this vision and how do we get better outcomes. So we worked together, our central office team, to develop this priority question that you see. How can we operationalize the vision of the district through PONE? PONE stands for Portrait of a Needham Educator. So the question became, who do our educators need to be in order for them to manifest or create the conditions for this portrait of a graduate? So we went through the process and we identified some data that helped us understand a learner-centered problem. So based on our examination of professional development offerings for adults, interviews with principals, looking at student academic performance, our district leadership team, we realized that we have a lot of things going well for us. And for our teachers, our staff are getting great professional development opportunities, but those opportunities aren't necessarily explicitly tied to the strategic actions outlined in our plan. So then we turned the mirror on ourselves and we looked at our personal problem of practice as a central office team. And we realized that we did a lot of promoting about the vision and we talked about it, but we really hadn't created the conditions to drive this work. And we didn't have systems to measure impact or effectiveness. None of that. It was just all like, let's put these ideas out there and see how they go. So we created an action plan, and there are several steps in the action plan, and I'm going to share our action plan in a moment. But it wasn't enough to just create an action plan. We needed to really think about how will we assess implementation of that plan. And that's where I want to dig in a little further and share more of the story. So part of our action plan was to create this 3-year framework for professional learning in the district. And all of our leaders were committed to providing professional learning that fell within one of these categories. Our content directors and department chairs focused on pedagogy. Our principals focused on culture and climate. And then everyone was kind of working on accountability and making sure those beginning of the year goals, evaluation goals, were somehow tied to the strategic vision of the district. We implemented for a year. Now, we weren't prescriptive with what the professional learning looked like, but it had to fit within this band or arc. And so for a year, 2024 to 2025, last school year, we ran the plan. We ran the plan and we asked people to think about the evidence that they're going to collect and share back with the team. And then we collected some data. So we went through, oh, let me share this. So if you haven't bought your System-Wise book yet, don't worry. We're going to give you an opportunity to do that later. But part of the book shares this matrix that we call a systems developmental path to radical inclusivity. And so when I was a young administrator, it was really important that we include all stakeholders. But what that looked like was kind of sketch. This matrix helps us really think about to what level, to what degree do we really believe that stakeholders have value and can partner with us to co-create new systems and make decisions. So it's a deeper level of inclusivity. And so after central office ran our own data inquiry cycle, we put some actions in place. We asked leaders to participate. We needed to come back and ask them, how's it going? And so this piece was really important. How do we recognize the strengths and assets of our team and community? We just did something for the first time. We were united around professional learning in a new way for the very first time, and we needed to build on those strengths in order to go deeper. So collected data, sent out a little Google form, and I asked people, in this year, what did you work on? Right? And it needed to be within the realm. Some people worked on more than one things because you could select more than one response here. But of the 24 responses, you can kind of see most people were looking at universal design for learning and culturally responsive practices. Very important for us walking out our vision of a graduate. I asked them, how did it go? I like highlights and dimmers. Um, we can sometimes skew things a little too negative, right? And so I wanted to say, okay, it wasn't completely lights out. It wasn't all bad, but what are some things we need to have on our radar? And I won't read all of this to you, but it was really important that our leaders got to say that we're developing this common language, right? We have this portrait of a Needham graduate with competencies, but it means different things to different people, right? And universal design for learning is a very broad framework. To understand what that looks like in our classrooms at different levels and different content areas was really important. And so we're building some vocabulary around that. This idea of curiosity and exploration, teachers don't have time to be curious and explore all the time. They're so often putting out fires or being reactive. And so slowing things down in this professional development provided that opportunity, which was really important when we want folks to reflect on their practices. But then not everything was rosy, right? If it's not your favorite topic and we're doing it all year, that's not ideal. I don't know about you and your district, but this idea of there's too much on the plate is an analogy that's used quite a bit, and initiative fatigue is real. And then some really struggled with how to document progress. I let them know at the beginning of the year that we'd be collecting data to see how it went, but that they weren't always sure on like what kind of data do we actually collect when we're talking about adult professional learning. I asked our leaders of the group that you're working with, what percentage of this group is actually meeting your expectations? Whatever expectation you laid out, read an article, try a new practice in your classroom, observe another teacher and give them feedback, like whatever the expectation was, what percent of your staff is actually meeting your expectation? And we were pretty astonished with how many folks said, yes, people are meeting my expectations. Now, again, this doesn't tell us if they were low level, low hanging fruit, or very rigorous expectations. But what it does tell us is that people are moving with us. When we set an expectation and we partner with them, they're moving with us. I mean, when you're thinking about what's expected of early adopters, what percentage of a group might be early adopters, we're talking about maybe 15 to 20. So this was significant for us to see our strengths and assets and start to build on some success. We got into small groups after looking at that data, and we asked our question, um, what's getting in the way? Is it skill or is it will? Sometimes it's hard to know. People are tired, they're overwhelmed, they have different priorities, but we wanted to try to sort that out. And because we had just finished the cycle, we implemented our action plan, we reviewed our progress monitoring data. We did this like window activity to kind of see into people's thinking. We asked them to notice and wonder in small groups, think about something that they wanted to celebrate out of what they saw in that data. And what's the charge? Usually in the DataWise network, we talk about next steps. But I wanted something a little more provocative. As leaders, I wanted to use the word charge to help people understand there is a little more urgency around this so that we can keep some momentum. Here's some more examples of what they said. They notice elements of coherence, which is really important when you have many initiatives going in a district and you're trying to focus on one vision, right? So building coherence is important. They said the charge is more collaboration within the department, within schools, and across schools. I love this one on the right, where we want to celebrate that we see it happening, right? There is evidence of our hard work and our practice, and that is super exciting. And then the charge is we want a return on investment. If we are saying teachers need to practice universal design for learning in their classrooms, they need to create opportunities for culturally responsive teaching and pedagogy and student responses. How do we do that? Right? So that's the charge to all of us. Very inspiring. Here's another example. So we went through that activity and we came to these conclusions. At the end of year one, based on here's the umbrella of topics and our data collection of what actually happened, we realized that year one was really about a year of planning and delivery. And so it was a year of introducing frameworks to teachers, providing them with restorative justice and responsive classroom trainings, orienting them to SMART goals and how to align that to district priorities, right? A year of planning, delivery, getting started, initiating this work. Year two, then, based on how year one went, we decided year two would be more about assessment strategies and practices. How will we know it's working? What are the evidence sources that we want to start to collect? So typically when we're in schools and we're talking about students as the center of our work, we tend to want to focus on student data. But this is really a both and because our learners are not students here. Our learners are the adults. How do the adults create the conditions to help work towards this portrait of a Needham graduate? And so our activities are really centered on how do we support those adults in year two? Okay, so guess what? This is year two. I'm in it right now. It feels like another beginning. We're not starting something new. We're going deeper, right? We're going deeper. So system level leaders needed to see themselves and one another. The data collection process and prompting inspired joy while still in this process. The end of the year, it was joyful. And we're somewhat excited about, hey, we did it once, maybe we could do it again. That was great. It's great. So year two, we decide to introduce Canvas. And I'm sure most of us are familiar with Canvas as a learning management system. Many of us probably used Canvas in college. Maybe Blackboard was your experience. In schools, many schools are using Google Classroom to support instruction, but Google Classroom is not actually a learning management system. Some schools use Schoology or other programs, and some don't have anything at all. But in my district, I felt it was really important that we protect the legacy of our curriculum because we are a very high performing school and that we find more ways to collaborate across departments because another important district goal for us is interdisciplinary opportunities. And given our scheduling, it's almost impossible to create meetings across departments. Another hurdle was scope and sequence. And so we have department leaders at the middle school and a different set of department leaders at the high school. And it is a constant effort to make sure that we have strong scope and sequence across levels to ensure that student experience is coherent. So we had a Canvas launch day on November 10th to begin to orient our teachers to Canvas as their new LMS. And this brochure just kind of illustrates the data that I collected to support this initiative belonging to everyone. If you're a district leader and you collect data, that data is not just for you. So I encourage you to share that with everyone because now we all become responsible for it. You can scroll down to the last page, please. Um, and this is quick, but you all will have access to the slides. What I really wanted to share is we had a section for open-ended comments, and we summarized the themes of those comments and shared them with the entire staff, even though they weren't all positive, right? And so, again, our goal is always joyful change, joyful change management and initiatives, but they don't always start there. And I thought it was really important that we name and be vulnerable with how people are feeling at this stage of the implementation. If we could get back to the slide deck. All right, there we go. All right. So I might be the only one in my district who wants to move forward with Canvas and believes in the why, but that's just the beginning. That's not the end. More work to be done. So this is what we know about complex change initiatives, right? Besides folks experiencing loss, when we don't have what's on the left side of this, when we're not clear about the vision, if people don't have the skills they believe they need, and that's the case with Canvas, new skills have to be learned. If we're not completely incentivized, we don't understand the why or why for me. If there's a lack of resources, which is there ever enough time? And the action plan, maybe that wasn't their design, then there's going to be a gap when it comes to joy. And as you can see again with these themes, we're dealing with a lack of joy. There's a lack of understanding and even skepticism as to how Canvas will make our work better compared to current practices. This idea that there's a desire for clarity on how courses will be designed and how much consistency is expected across levels and departments. That question is about how much autonomy am I going to have to give up in order to do this work? So there's some real grappling that our team has to do with how to support this initiative and bring the joy back because we ended the year on such a high.